Welcome to Fire at the Museum of London. This is our special exhibition about the Great Fire of 1666. My name's Nina Sprigg and I'm going to take you through to meet Muriel Jeter, the exhibition curator. Hello Muriel.
Hi Nina.
So can you tell us about what a curator does?
So for this exhibition I read a lot of books to find out what happened in the Great Fire. I chose the objects and helped to put the exhibition together. So today I'm going to be showing you around the exhibition so we can investigate the fire, what happened and how London changed.
So this represents what London looked like before the Great Fire started?
Yes, so this is a typical London street before the fire. So it's narrow, it's dark, the upper floors of the houses are leaning out into the street, which makes it narrower and easier for fires to spread. And of course, the Great Fire began on a narrow street like this called Pudding Lane.
Yes.
So if you come with me, I can show you how the fire started. The Great Fire started in Thomas Farriner's bakery on Pudding Lane at about 1 o'clock in the morning. We don't know exactly how the fire began, but we think maybe a spark from his oven set fire to some wood next to it. And then the family were woken up with the smoke coming up the stairs. So Thomas, his daughter Hannah and their manservant escaped out of the window upstairs, but their maid was too frightened to jump out, and so we think she was the first person to die in the fire. So this fire that just starts in a bakery ends up destroying a quarter of London in 4 days.
Imagine that for a moment. Perhaps you'd like to act it out where you're sitting. Imagine waking up in the middle of the night to feel smoke in your face and to hear the burning sounds. Imagine having to climb out of the window on the street to escape and then having to wake up your neighbours. Maybe you'd shout together, "Help! Fire! Help! Wake up! Wake up!" Okay, let us go through now to see how the fire spread.
So you can see the fire beginning in Pudding Lane on Sunday the 2nd of September, and there was this huge storm wind that was blowing in from the east which pushed the fire across the city. So you can see the direction that the fire is spreading across this map. This is Tuesday the 4th of September, which is the worst day of the fire, and this is when some of the most famous buildings are destroyed, like St Paul's Cathedral. So by the end of Tuesday the fire was 1.5 miles wide, so it would take you half an hour to walk from one side of it to the other. On Wednesday the wind died down, and that's when people started to be able to finally get control of the fire. And then by the time the sun comes up on Thursday morning, the fire is out, though some places actually smouldered for months afterwards.
Why do you think the fire got so bad? I'm going to give you 30 seconds now to discuss this with someone next to you before Muriel tells you some of the reasons that we think are responsible. So let's see if you thought of a lot of the reasons that we have about why the fire got so bad.
Well, here we have a symbol of the moon, and that's to show that the fire started in the middle of the night when most people were asleep, so there weren't enough people around to stop it right at the beginning. And here we have a picture of the sun, because the fire began at a time at the end of a long hot summer, so London was really dry. And then this, we've got a picture of the wind, and that's because there was this huge storm wind blowing from the east that night, and it pushed the fire across the city. Yeah. And then down here we've got buildings, and that's because a lot of the houses in London were made from wood, and that burns easily. And also Lots of the houses were built very close together, so it was easy for the fire to spread from one house to the next.
Yes, of course. I wonder if you thought of a lot of the same reasons that we did about why the fire got so bad. But Meryl, what were people doing while the fire was spreading?
Well, if you come this way, I can show you. Because the fire was so fierce, a lot of people gave up trying to put it out, and they concentrated on trying to save as many of their belongings as they could. And we know a lot about the fire because of a diary written by a man called Samuel Pepys.
Oh, yes.
And he worked for the Navy, and he describes people fleeing from the fire through the streets of London. And even on the river, they were putting their belongings into boats. And he says that 1 in 3 boats had a virginal in it, and this is a virginal. So it's like a piano, I suppose, and it would have been expensive, so definitely the sort of thing you would want to rescue from the fire.
It's very beautiful. I suppose it's a bit like today, we might not rescue our pianos, we might rescue PlayStations and computers and all the expensive items we have.
Yes.
So all these people were worrying about their belongings, but what about fighting the fire?
Well, I've got some firefighting equipment over here, so I can show you that. Lots of people worked together to fight the Great Fire. So you had the King, Charles II, his brother, the Duke of York, soldiers from the army, people from the Navy, and Londoners themselves, all working together. And the main thing they had to do was to pull houses down to create gaps to stop the fire from spreading. And to do that, they had these huge hooks called fire hooks. So you put that over the timbers of a house and you pull, and that pulls the house down.
That is huge, isn't it? And it looks very heavy. I can't imagine trying to use it to pull houses down.
No, well, it took 3 of us just to put it into the exhibition. So it is really heavy.
I tell you what, why don't you try with a friend, imagining you're using a huge fire hook to pull houses down. Meryl and I will demonstrate. Oh, it would be really heavy, wouldn't it? And
Very
hard
much.
to do.
Yes.
And then you'd have your houses crumbling down.
Yes. The other thing you could do was throw buckets of water onto the fire. We've got leather buckets here, the sort they would have used, and using fire squirts
yes.
as well. So this is like a huge syringe. So you put the pointy end in a bucket of water, and then you pull the handle out to suck the water up.
Yes.
And then you aim it and you push the handle in and the water squirts out.
So that's like a huge water pistol sort of thing. Exactly. Why don't you have a go with your fire squirt? Soak up the water, aim, whoosh.
Even school children helped to fight the fire.
Right.
And we know this because there was a boy called William Taswell when he was 14 years old in 1666. And he wrote his memories of the Great Fire when he was an adult. And he worked together with other schoolboys from Westminster School to fight the fire around the church of St Dunstan in the east. And they stopped the church from being destroyed.
Fantastic. Good for William.
Yes.
So no fire brigade in those days, or fire engines like we know today?
No, so they didn't have a fire brigade, but they did have fire engines, but they were much simpler than the ones we have today. I can show you one if you like.
Oh, yes, please.
This is the type of fire engine they would have had in 1666. So it's really simple. It's a barrel on wheels with a pump in the centre. So you have to fill it up with buckets of water, and then you push the arms down, and that makes the water squirt out of the pipe in the centre. So you have to push down at the same time. So you push down, and then the water squirts out.
So you might want to try pumping the fire engine. Oh, it'd be quite hard work.
It would, yeah, really hard work.
So what happened when the fire was finally put out?
Well, this was the scene on Thursday, the 6th of September, when the fire was out. Just a sea of rubble with piles of debris, with spires of churches and chimneys sticking out of the rubble. When people walked through the ruins, they got lost. They couldn't find where their house used to be. And in fact, this whole area became very dangerous. If you walked through it at night, you might get robbed.
And I wonder, did people find any belongings left in among the ruins?
Well, actually today we find the things that people left behind. So when archaeologists dig up bits of London, they sometimes find the belongings of, burnt remains. And we've got some on display actually in the exhibition if you'd like to see. These metal objects were found by archaeologists on the site of a house that had been destroyed in the Great Fire. They've been damaged by the heat and then they've got really rusty. So it was really hard for the archaeologists to work out what they were. So they had to x-ray them to see the objects underneath the layers of rust. Just like if you break your arm, the doctors have to x-ray your arm to see the bones underneath your skin.
Yes, of course. Before we reveal the x-rays, just see if you can work out what this rusty object is.
Press the x-ray.
Oh, right.
See, it's a padlock.
Yes.
And then this object here, which looks like just a lump of rust. Press the x-ray and it's a key.
Oh, you can see it's a key, yes.
Yeah. And then there's a really interesting object down here, which looks like a rusty square. Press the x-ray and it's a waffle maker.
I didn't know they had waffle makers.
I know, it's an amazing thing to survive.
Oh, what a lovely object.
And it's very heavy, so I can see why somebody would have left it behind when they were escaping from the fire.
Yes. So what happened to all these poor homeless Londoners?
Well, I can show you over here. Over 13,000 houses burnt down, so about 100,000 people lost their homes.
100,000 people, and what happened to them all? Where did they go?
Well, thousands of people camped in the fields outside of London, and some people lived there for up to 8 years in sheds that they built.
I want you just to shut your eyes for a moment. If you've got space, you might want to lie down or lean against a friend and just imagine sleeping in the fields. Imagine what it was like for the people that were made homeless, and listen to this eyewitness account of people's experiences.
The poor inhabitants were dispersed all about St. George's, Moorfields, as far as Highgate, and several miles around. Some were in tents, others under miserable huts and hovels, without a rag to wear or any necessities. Those who had lived in luxury and riches were now reduced to extreme misery and poverty.
So all people were affected, rich and poor. Now they were just sleeping side by side.
Yes, and the king realised that some people had lost everything in the fire, so he set up a special fund, and people from around the country sent money to London to help.
I suppose just like today, we raise money for charity, don't we? In fact, perhaps you remember a time when your school has raised money for charity.
And what people did here, and this is a little document, and it's from the village of Cowfold in Sussex, and it says that they donated 53 shillings and 9 pence to the Fire Relief Fund, which is about £400 in today's money, so they were really generous.
Oh, that's really nice from a little village.
So if you wanted some money from the fund, you could write a letter to the Lord Mayor explaining how the Great Fire had made you really poor, and he would give you some money from the fund.
Right, and what about the rebuilding of the city itself?
Well, if you come this way, I can show you more about that. After the fire, lots of people had different ideas about how to rebuild the city, to try and get rid of all the old problems of crowded streets where fires could happen. So they suggested building long, wide roads, but actually it would have been too expensive to do that. The quickest way really to rebuild London was to let people build their houses on the same place as they had before. If you look at these two maps, one is from before the fire and one is from after, the street layout is almost exactly the same.
Oh, yes.
Though the layout of London didn't change much after the fire, the way London looked changed because the fire got rid of all of the old wooden buildings.
All right, so there were rules for how things could be built?
Yes, I can show you. So here we can see the new houses have to be built from brick.
Oh, yes.
And if you build a wooden house, then it will be pulled down. Houses are no longer allowed to lean out into the street the way they did before.
Very wise.
You have to have a straight house. If you live in an important street, you can have a 4-storey house.
Oh,
like
nice.
that.
The sort of house we see in London today.
Yeah. Or if you live in a very small street, you can have a smaller 2-storey house like this one. This picture shows what London looked like in 1682 when most of it had been rebuilt after the fire. So this is the area that was ruined before, and now you can see it's full of buildings and houses. So most people were able to rebuild their homes within 10 years. Big buildings like churches took longer, and St Paul's Cathedral actually wasn't finished until 1711.
Right.
And that's 45 years after the fire. So the artist has cheated, and he's made St Paul's Cathedral look like it's finished, even when it wasn't. So this brings us to the end of the exhibition. So we've told the full story of the fire right from the beginning to the rebuilding. And it was such a terrible disaster that affected so many thousands of people. I think it's a huge achievement that they were able to rebuild the city and recover afterwards.
Well, thank you for joining us for this walk around the Far Far exhibition at the Museum of London. And thank you to Meryl for showing us around.
It's a pleasure.